Hope you will warmly welcome Brooks Lamb to join us tonight.
Thank you, Leah, for the very generous, very kind introduction. I appreciate it. Before I begin tonight, I want to take just a few moments to share thanks and to share gratitude, first and foremost, to the Berry Center. Thank y'all for hosting me tonight. Thank y'all for uplifting the book. And most importantly, thank y'all for the good work that you do in Henry County and in the way that it inspires communities far beyond here. I want to say a quick word of thanks to my wife, Reagan, who made the drive up with me from Tennessee today. And a final thanks to all of y'all. It is a rainy, messy evening. Y'all did not have to come here tonight, but you did, and I really, really appreciate it. I'm with my family in the long field by the road. It's a blue sky day in May, and the sun is rising higher as we move from mid to late morning. I'm wearing blue jeans, a t-shirt, a ball cap, and bifocals. It's a big day in our family's year, a day when we plant our hopes alongside burley tobacco. I'm only 5 years old, but I can feel the work's weight. Mama is standing near the fence row under the shade of cedar, hackberry, and bodock trees. My grandfather, Papa Horace, is standing with her. They're holding trays of plants and waiting to bring them into the sunshine. Daddy and Patrick, my middle brother, are sitting low to the ground on the tobacco setter, just a piece of yellow foam rubber to cushion the time-worn plywood seats. I'm perched on the water barrel right behind them, and my oldest brother, Michael, is driving the M. John Deere, pulling the three of us along. A small trail of dust rises behind the setter's metal wheels. Mom and Papa step out and meet us at the end of the row. They take Daddy's and Patrick's empty trays and hand them full ones. Michael swings the tractor out, makes a tight U-turn, straightens the wheels, and heads back down a new row, his eyes locked on a tree in the opposite fence line to keep our path straight. Just beyond my dangling feet, Daddy lowers the setter's blade into the ground. Patrick reaches back to pull the lever that turns the water on, and we're off. One by one, every 18 inches, Daddy and Patrick carefully set tobacco plants into dry dirt. A click from the setter's ground-driven gears releases a splash of water from the barrel for each plant. Like clockwork, Daddy and Patrick match their motions to the water's release, giving each plant a chance to thrive. When the barrel's full, some of the water splashes out through the lid on top. Since that lid is my seat, it soaks through my blue jeans. But it's warm outside, and the water we've pumped from the pond is cold, so I don't mind. I look down through my thick lenses, and I see all that's happening below me. I listen to my father and brother talk while they work, or when the conversation lulls, as it often does, I listen to our old John Deere putter along. When I'm a little older, a little bigger, a little more able, I'll give up my water barrel perch to move closer to the ground, to work instead of watch. With Daddy's and Patrick's example seared into my mind, I will swap in and set myself. Scenes like this, where families work together on a small acreage farm, where they touch and know the ground beneath them, where they make room for a child to watch and learn and begin to hear the calling of caring for place, are getting rarer. Now, I say this not with nostalgia, not with any wistfulness for a simpler bygone time, and certainly not with any romanticism for tobacco, which gave 3 of my 4 grandparents, including Papa Horace, the cancer that killed them. I say it as fact. Small and mid-sized family farms are struggling. In rural communities across the country, from my family's home place in Marshall County, Tennessee, to the rolling hills of Henry County, Kentucky, and thousands of other places throughout the nation and the world. These farms are disappearing. Now, we know this from data, from statistics. Recently released information from the Census of Agriculture shows that the United States saw a decline of more than 140,000 farms between 2017 and 2022. That's a 7% drop in only 5 years. Over that same period, my home state of Tennessee saw the loss of nearly 7,000 farms, a 10% decline. That detail alone is concerning. But what's more troubling is the kinds of farms that are most affected here. About 97% of the decline came from farms that are less than 500 acres in size. My family's 75-acre farm is still active, but we are losing our neighbors and our peers. Now, on the other hand, the biggest farms in the volunteer state, those that are 2,000 acres and larger, they increased over that same 5-year period. They cover over 600,000 more acres now than they did just a few years ago. Kentucky's data parallel Tennessee's. Our homes are part of a merciless trend toward consolidation of farms, of land, of wealth, and of power in American agriculture. That trend, that imperative to get big or get out, has persisted for decades. It causes real harm to ecosystems and the environment, to rural economies, to local and regional food systems, to places and people themselves. When 50 100-acre farms are replaced by one 5,000-acre farm, the capacity for community is erased. Yet it's not just consolidation that's threatening smaller-scale farms and rural communities. When they aren't being subsumed into ever larger industrial farming operations, these farms are too often being taken out of agriculture entirely. Haphazard real estate development and suburban sprawl are transforming farmland into what investors and land use experts call higher and better uses. Whole farms and fields are being carved up to build subdivisions and strip malls. This sort of conversion, which can lead to rural gentrification, is happening most aggressively in the American South, but it's impacting places across the country. Projections from American Farmland Trust, where I work, suggest that if recent trends continue, we could compromise around 20 million acres of farmland in the United States over the next 2 decades. Tennessee could convert over 1 million acres during that span. Kentucky could lose nearly 460,000 acres. My colleagues who conducted that research called these estimates conservative. All these numbers, the figures and the statistics and the percentages that show how we are hemorrhaging small farms, how we're paving over irreplaceable fields, pastures, and forests, are useful, or at least they can be. They illustrate the scale and the intensity of the problems that we face. They highlight our societal neglect, intentional and unintentional, of working lands and working people. But we don't need the numbers to understand what's happening. If we take the time to look, we will see these changes in our literal and figurative landscape firsthand. We'll see the farms and families displaced, the fence rows ripped out, the land exploited, the churches, schools, and feed stores closed. Loss isn't just a number on a spreadsheet. For those close to the impact, it is loss. Loss, deeply, deeply felt. It's loss of friends, neighbors, soil, and places. I have certainly seen and felt this loss. In the 25 years since I was a little boy riding the water barrel on our tobacco setter, I have witnessed the transformation of rural places in my own hometown and well beyond. And I'm not alone. While researching and writing Love for the Land, I interviewed several dozen smaller scale farmers and local leaders in 2 Tennessee communities outside of Nashville. These 2 places, close to my home, are microcosms of the issues that are affecting agricultural communities and local economies all throughout the country. Stories and experiences from communities like these can teach us something if we're willing to listen. Toting a voice recorder and a notepad, I asked farmers and community members about the challenges they face, and they answered. Speaking about the impacts of consolidation and industrialism, one farmer and elected leader said, "I hate it, but the farm program we've got today put the little farmer out of business. It did. The little farmers can't keep up with the big ones." He continued saying, "This is the biggest problem that his community faces. Small farms are disappearing. It's because they can't afford to make a living off a small farm. So land is sold to whoever can pull in there with 5 combines. That's where I see the biggest change. The family farms are leaving because they can't afford to stay." It's sad, a small dairy farmer told me over the phone as he was waiting for a tractor tire to be fixed at a local farm store. You've got some big row crop farmers that are rooting a lot of the little guys out. A cattle farmer from a different town echoed that perspective. Speaking from experience, he said, "A small farmer's having a hard time making it right now because they can't get the land to raise hay, corn, and stuff for their livestock because all these bigger farmers are coming in. Say 5 years ago, a 50 or 60 acre farm, one of these big grain farmers wouldn't even look at it. And the little farmer would farm it, raising hay or corn or something to feed their stock. But now, these big farmers are renting and buying all the land. If they can get their combine on it, they'll take it. And that cuts the little farmer out." People shared these same sorts of grounded insights into farmland loss from real estate development and growth. Now, growth itself is not a bad thing. Rural communities need to grow, but they need to grow thoughtfully and carefully. The 2 Middle Tennessee counties where I based my interviews and research have taken less care in their approach to growth. Their leaders have been tempted by short-term gains, and some fail to comprehend what they're losing. Each of these counties has erased tens of thousands of acres of agricultural land over the last few decades, and each is poised to convert more. Speaking of his town, a farmer told me that this is just Subdivision City. It used to be a rural community, agricultural, and now it's just, houses have grown up. Another farmer who lives near the same town said, "Today, as we speak, I can carry you and show you a half a dozen new developments going on, from 30 to 40 acres to 700 acres. It has been a drastic change." Speaking about the explosion of bedroom communities, these places where people only sleep because they work, eat, shop, and play in nearby cities that are usually an hour or less away, several locals had thoughts to share. Now, one person summed up the situation particularly well, noting, "We're close to Interstate 65. A lot of people commute to Nashville. You get on the interstate, and it's a hop, skip, and a jump up here from Nashville. They don't want to live in Nashville. They want to get out here and live in the country. That's one of the things I think that is driving up demand for property. People want to live out in the rural area and then work in the big city without rooting back in their home." This rampant farmland loss has environmental and ecological impacts. It throttles the capacity for local food systems, and it puts even tighter economic pressures on farmers who want to stay in place, or new and beginning farmers like myself who want to buy a farm and root into a rural community. Over time, it also strains local government budgets as the need to expand community services increases. Now, all of these impacts, they're very well known, they're very well studied. But it also takes a psychological toll on the farmers who remain. After all, it is hard to watch your neighbors and your family and their farms be replaced. Some people said the farmland loss around them made them sick. Others said that it hurts. Several used the word heartbreak, and some said that they grieve the loss. One person said he wasn't sure whether to cuss or whether to cry, and another described a recurring nightmare about the land around his family's farm being turned into fast food restaurants and strip malls. Now, when I asked how it felt to see all the farms around him swallowed up, one older farmer began to cry. Over the phone, he said, "It's an eye-opener to see how much land is going away from farming. Seeing that much around me, it's something I didn't think I'd see in my lifetime." It was especially hard, he said, trailing off, because some of that land was his own. Years ago, he and his wife had to sell 12 acres of road frontage because they fell on hard times. I spoke with other farmers who had been forced to do the same thing, to pay down debts or to take care of sick parents. They called that experience traumatic. These dual challenges of agricultural consolidation and farmland loss make perseverance difficult for small and mid-sized farmers in these two communities and beyond, especially when coupled with other struggles. For example, I interviewed several black farmers for this book, and they spoke to the prejudice and the racism that they have faced in agriculture. Like so many other farmers of color, they described underrepresentation on agricultural committees, loan denials, and challenges associated with heirs property, among many other issues. It was eye-opening to hear all of these things firsthand. It is important that we discuss these various challenges, that we be honest about them, and that we reckon with them. But we can't stop there. We must also look for a way forward. In the face of despair and difficulty, we must seek out grounds for hope. As Mr. Barry has written in one of his Sabbath poems, we can found our hope on the ground beneath us and in the people who care for that ground and each other as neighbors and as friends. The same farmers who shine a light on all the problems facing American agriculture can also cast their beams ahead, revealing a path forward past the crippling consolidation and conversion that surround us now. Specifically, we can learn from and be led by these farmers' imagination of, affection for, and fidelity to place. These terms will be familiar to readers of Mr. Barry's writing. They're common themes of both his work and his life. In these concepts, which I frame as virtues or character dispositions that lead us to live and act in certain ways, we find the language needed to improve our care for the land and for each other. Now, imagination is one of the most intimate forms of knowledge possible, and it's far different from our popular understanding of the term. Usually, when we hear someone say imagination, it's in the context of a child dreaming up otherworldly scenes, talking animals, dancing trees, a smiling sun. Instead, imagination, as Mr. Barry describes it, is as real as it gets. It's knowing a specific place in all of the richness of detail that makes it unique. It is similar to familiarity, awareness, and attunement. It's a knowledge that evolves over time, and it sparks connection. Now, affection is a deep and enduring love for a place, one that is hard-earned. It's also learned from both our own on-the-ground education and from watching others who have learned to love places before us. Affection is not reactive or sentimental. It is forceful. It reckons with difficulties and reality. It's honest about struggles, yet it remains. And importantly, it informs our actions. Now, fidelity is a lot like loyalty or devotion. It's a desire to care for a place over time, to commit to the place and the people and the creatures within it. Imagination leads to affection. Affection yields fidelity. And when that fidelity is rooted in love, it becomes a welcome obligation, a responsibility that we cherish. Now, for years, I've been exploring these virtues and considering their significance. These concepts make sense on the page, and they resonate within my own life and my family. But I wanted to better understand how they inform other people's actions. I wanted to see how they work on the ground, particularly in the face of adversity. So after asking the farmers featured in Love for the Land about the struggles that they face, I asked them what has motivated their perseverance. Why have these farmers persisted in place? They use different words, but time and time again, they cited the virtues of imagination, affection, and fidelity as some of their key reasons for resilience. When speaking of imagination, many farmers said that they know their land. They've come to understand it through years of work and play, from thousands of hay bales tossed down from the loft, hundreds of walks through a back field, years and sometimes generations spent tending a specific place on earth. One man, a black farmer from Murray County, shared a story from his childhood. His dad was building a new fence, and he wanted his children to be with him. They were too young to make a difference. They couldn't swing a hammer and drive the steeples. They couldn't pound the post, and they couldn't pull the wire. But his father wanted them there. This farmer told me, "We were probably in the way, but he had us out there teaching us to do this and that. The way we got our knowledge of farming and work, it was all hands-on." Between these experiences and the pony rides that he used to take on the farm at night with his brothers, this farmer humbly shared, "I'm pretty well acquainted with this land." He and others offered a common refrain when speaking about their connection to and knowledge of the land, saying, "This place is a part of me." Imagination of that kind stimulates affection. And to be fair, few, if any, of the people that I interviewed used that word specifically, affection. But when I asked why they continued to farm, many said that they do so out of love. One farmer told a story about working with his pigs. Now, at the time, he was going to college and also trying to farm full-time, so he was pretty busy. He went out one day to feed his pigs in the middle of a heavy rain. He was pulling on a feeder, trying to move it to a new spot, when his feet slipped right out from under him. He fell flat on his back in a mud hole. Now, this farmer told me that immediately a 4-letter word came to his mind. But it's not one of the many 4-letter words that others, myself included, might have used in that situation. Instead, he thought to himself, "God, I love this. God, I love this." Now, it's a funny story, but it's also telling. Love isn't always rainbows and butterflies. Sometimes it's hard work and pigs and mud. A community leader, not a farmer himself, but someone who has come to know many farmers during his service, shared some other helpful comments about affection. When asked why some of his neighbors and friends continue to farm, he responded, "It's a good question. Why do they do it? Why go under the stress and the pressure and worry about the rain and all the insects and all the challenges that come with farming? If you're not making much money at it, and not too many smaller scale farmers are at this moment, why do it?" I think it has to be their connection to the land. They complain and struggle about the prices they're getting or the drought or all the other things, but at the end of the day, they farm because they love it. Love like that leads to fidelity, or what the farmers in my book described as loyalty, duty, or their calling. That fidelity has led some of these farmers to turn down opportunities to expand their operations, because if they grew them, they wouldn't be able to tend the land themselves anymore, and they would become managers instead of farmers. It has led others to turn down unsolicited offers of $20,000 and $30,000 an acre for their land to be converted into residential developments. One farmer recounted a conversation that he had with a developer who knocked on his door one day. The developer said, "I tell you what, any place you face the highway, I'll give you $40,000 an acre. I will write you a check right now." That money would have made this man an instant millionaire. But without hesitation, he responded, "I wouldn't sell it to nobody at all." In practicing fidelity to place, other farmers interviewed for the book have placed conservation easements on their land, ensuring that the farm will always remain a farm. Others have taught their children the arts of farming, or for those with no heirs or any children interested in agriculture, tried to connect with other young people who might like to one day take over the farm. All of these people have sacrificed for the sake of good stewardship. Now, we can all learn from these farmers and the examples that they set. We can work to cultivate imagination, affection, and fidelity in our own lives, and we can encourage others to do the same. That may well be on a small farm, but it doesn't have to be. We can connect with, love, and care for places wherever we already are. That might be a backyard. It might be an urban park or a community garden. It might be paying attention to a tree planted in the sidewalk that we walk past every day on the way to work or school. It might be noticing how that tree changes throughout the seasons and years, and perhaps giving it some of the water from our own bottles as we pass. This act seems simple, maybe even silly, but as Liberty Hyde Bailey wrote over a century ago in The Holy Earth, if it were possible for every person to own a tree and to care for it, the good results would be beyond estimation. But it's not just that we should learn from these smaller scale farmers. We should also support them. Right now, our agricultural system turns virtues like imagination, affection, and fidelity into liabilities that demand constant sacrifice. These virtues are at odds with the never-ending hunger for efficiency, growth, and profit. We should instead work towards a system, an economy, a community that treats these virtues as assets that sustain and empower and that are worth upholding and spreading. There are policies and programs that we can implement at the federal, state, and local levels to move towards a better agriculture. I've spoken about these initiatives before, and I'm happy to do so again. But regardless of the specifics, it's important that whatever is done be attentive to place. As I write in the final chapter of the book, without virtues to guide on-the-ground efforts, the benefits of policy change will be muted. Imagination, affection, and fidelity will be necessary for any policies or programs to have the transformative impact that we all need. That is what I value so much about the Berry Center. Affection isn't incidental to your work. It's essential. You help people in your home live with love for the land. Let's return to that long field by the road. There's no longer a tobacco patch there. We raised a small crop of barley until I was a junior in high school, hanging on a few years after the end of the federal production controls that helped tobacco, again with its tremendous flaws, be an essential crop for the economic viability of many agrarian communities. It's a hayfield now. In a few weeks, on a sunny, blue sky day in May, my family will be in that field again. We'll be working together on one of the most important days of our farming year, when we haul the hay that sustains our cattle through the winter. Papa Horace is gone, and we miss him. My oldest brother, Michael, now lives in North Carolina, teaching students about character and hope. But Mama and Daddy will be there, moving a little slower, still moving. Patrick and his wife, Katie, will be there, and so will their children. My wife, Reagan, and I will drive home from Memphis, where we're living, until we can find a farm of our own. Wearing blue jeans, t-shirts, and ball caps, we will join the others. An old tractor will crawl around the field, and we'll toss hay bales onto the wagon and stack them neatly, and then go unload them in the barn. We will sweat, strain, talk, and laugh together, our feet firmly on the ground beneath us. Our small farm remains, and against tough odds, others do too. To sustain them and found new ones will be a labor of love. It will be hard work worth doing together. Thank y'all.